Right. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of the last council meeting. They've been on the table for the last half hour. Can I confirm that you can agree these and I can sign them?
Agree.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have received apologies from councillors Paddy Blagden, Pat Frost, Robert Knowles, Martin Lear, Kika Mirrlees, Stephen Mulliner, Jeanette and Stuart Stinnett, Simon Thornton, and I understand that Peter Isherwood may be running late.
Thank you for that. Members, you'll notice that leader is not present, Robert Knowles. That's because his mother is seriously ill at the moment. And with your agreement, I think we should collectively send our best wishes to him and his mother for a speedy recovery. Thank you. Declarations of interest, please.
None received in advance, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor's announcements. Unexpectedly, it's been a busy time the last couple of months, and I'm extremely grateful both to my Deputy Mayor, Chris, and for the past Mayor, Liz, for bailing me out for when we've been double and sometimes treble booked on occasions. There have been all sorts of interesting things I've been involved in on behalf of the Borough. This time of year, both the Lord Lieutenant and the High Sheriff have been having their award ceremonies, which I've been attending. And so we've gone from really formal occasions like that to being dressed up for a children's Mad Hatter Tea Party, where I seem to have been roped in to be part of the amusement for the main participants. There has also been, since our last meeting, the Dance Fund concert, and many thanks to those of you who are able to support that. On the night, just under 200 people attended, and we raised just over £3,000 for the Dance Fund. So it was a very enjoyable evening, and those of you who didn't make it, you don't really know what you missed, because it was pretty good. And big thanks to St Catherine's School for allowing us to hold it in their new concert hall. Peter Betlam, a past mayor and councillor of this borough, had his 90th birthday early at the end of last month, and I was pleased to be able to attend that. And he indeed brought some of his Dutch cousins over to bring both sides of the family together. So that was another pleasant occasion. And a more serious and sadder occasion, the finance director and I represented the borough at Gillian Ferguson's funeral 2 weeks ago. As some of you will realise, she was a leader of the council from 2006-2007, and so that was a sad event. But moving on, and that's really all I want to say at this stage. So we move on now to item 5, the proposed loyal address. Councillor Potts.
Mr. Mayor and colleagues, thank you. In just over a day's time, Her Majesty the Queen will be 90 years old and hopefully celebrate a very happy day as she enters her 91st year. Queen Elizabeth, our Queen, has spent her entire life in the service of this country, and during her long reign, that of the Commonwealth. At the age of just 13, the Second World War started against Nazi Germany, and Her Majesty made broadcasts and later in the war served in uniform. And then, at a very young age, became our Queen. As I have said, a lifetime of service and an example to us all. I'm sure we all wish Her Majesty our very best wishes for Thursday and for continued good health and a long reign, and I propose that we send greetings as set out in the agenda to Her Majesty. Colleagues, you will see these as listed at item 5. Thank you.
Members, I hope we have your agreement that we should do this.
Agree.
Thank you. Moving on. And that's the letter that both myself and the Deputy Leader will sign and will go out tonight. So be assured that that's on its way. Questions from members of the public? Mr. Alexander.
Sorry, thank you. In relation to the fraud that occurred in April 2014, 19 senior Conservative councillors knew of the fraud. knowledge of the fraud was deliberately kept from all junior Conservative councillors, all UKIP councillors, and all independent councillors. This fraud was not reported in the 2013-14 annual financial statements as a post-balance sheet event, and nor was it disclosed in the 2014-15 annual financial statements in the year in which it occurred. The Waverley's Members' Code of Conduct requires that its members behave with openness, accountability, and integrity. This behaviour is also required of those in public life under Section 28 of the Localism Act 2011. There is prima facie evidence that these requirements, the Code and the Act, have been breached by the 19 senior Conservative councillors as follows. 1. Openness. By concealing the fraud from other councillors and all residents, and not disclosing it in the annual financial statements, the 19 Conservative councillors have clearly breached this aspect of the Code and the Act. 2. Accountability. By concealing the fraud, the 19 Conservative councillors have prevented themselves from being held to account for their actions. 3. Integrity. The 19 Conservative councillors have shown a lack of integrity by concealing the fraud from opposition councillors, and this lack of integrity is particularly serious given there was a borough election in May 2015, and by concealing the fraud, the Conservatives enhanced their electoral prospects. In view of the fact that 1. There is prima facie evidence all councillors have broken both the Code of Conduct and the Act. 2. The breach of the Code and the Act was extensive, with 19 Conservative councillors implicated. And 3. The breach of the Code and the Act has been sustained for over 20 months, while the council will be ordering a full, independent and transparent investigation into the 19 councillors' conduct. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Councillor Potts.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alexander, for your question. And in short, the answer to that is no. I don't intend to enter into tit-for-tat politics. I don't think it's helpful in any way whatsoever where we have such a serious subject. I'm satisfied that members did act properly and followed both officer, legal and police advice. As you all know, Waverley has now publicised details of this matter, and there is no longer any risk of undermining a police investigation, as the trial of the perpetrator has actually now occurred and he has been sentenced. Accordingly, Waverley's issued full details which have now been published in a media release on the website. In answer to your other part of the question, as you are aware, the Council's monitoring officer has started to conduct a full investigation into the allegations you have made against councillors and members' conduct, and clearly it would be inappropriate for me to comment further on such a matter. It is a matter for the monitoring officer. Thank you.
Mr. Hime.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Waverley has issued a concluding statement regarding the £233,000 fraud incident, but important questions remain regarding how the matter was dealt with. Under the heading of matters relating to fraud requiring communication, Grant Thornton's audit findings report for 13-14 stated that, and I quote, "We have previously discussed the risk of fraud with the audit committee and been made aware of an external fraud affecting the council in April 2014. No other information was provided." Now, as members are no doubt aware, Waverley deals with numerous external fraud incidents, mostly relating to benefits fraud, and any backbencher or member of the public would have assumed the matter to have been of no public interest, because the nature, extent and significance of the fraud incident was completely hidden. With hindsight, many might say that it rather looks like a cover-up. And indeed, last year's 14-15 audit findings report states at page 15 that, and I quote, "We have previously discussed the risk of fraud with the audit committee. We have not been made aware of any incidents in the period." That statement by the auditor is quite clearly false. Excuse me. Furthermore, at page 22, the report under the heading of financial control The auditor adds, a review of internal audits reports identified that no significant issues were identified in respect of your key financial systems, and it goes on to say that we have identified strong arrangements in place to ensure robust financial government. Now, in the circumstances, such statements by the auditor would appear to be quite inappropriate, Mr. Mayor. And there is a clear need to instil a culture of accountability and transparency at Waverley in order that such falsehoods in the Council's and the auditor's reports do not occur. What effective action, Mr. Mayor, could members and the public take to ensure that standards are improved as necessary? Thank you.
Councillor Potts.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Hyman, thank you for your question. And thank you for a further question on the fraud. I do not accept that there has been any form of cover-up or inappropriate statements by the Council's external auditor, Grant Thornton. They are indeed a leading international accountancy and audit firm. I've covered much of the question already and answered that in my answers to Mr. Alexander, but in conclusion, I am satisfied that appropriate action has been taken in response to this incident and that the Audit Committee has been closely monitoring this matter. And I have no more to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then to...
Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me. Williamson, I don't think there's an area for debate at this stage. I think you will have your perspective, you'll have an opportunity to talk later.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, I understand that whilst we cannot debate Councillor matters
Williamson.
raised by the public question, under the Constitution,
Would you like to
section 10.8...
Would you like to sit down, please?
Could I please...
Thank you. I think you have an opportunity to come back to this issue at the end. At the end of the... Well, okay. My interpretation of the Constitution is this members' questions to the public are not subject to debate.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, I was not entering into a debate. In fact, what I was saying was that I understood that it was not a matter that you couldn't discuss it, discuss a public question. However, what the Constitution does say, under section 10.8,
yes,
that the matter could be brought to the next meeting of the Executive for debate. And in the interests of transparency, I'd like to move that the handling of the 2014 fraud incident be brought to the June Executive meeting for debate.
Okay. That's a proposal you're making. Do you have a seconder? Right. Wish to say any further at this stage? To sum up and make any other statement? Does your seconder wish to make a statement? No. Do we wish to then? Can I then call for a vote as to whether we accept this motion? Those in favour? Those against? Right. The motion is lost. Right. Right. We can now please move on. Right. Question time. Have any questions been received from members?
None received, Mr. Mayor.
Motions, Mr. Taylor.
None received in advance, Mr. Mayor.
Right, we then move on to the minutes of the executive and committee meetings. The meeting of the 1st of March, the executive meeting of 1st of March, Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to present the minutes from the executive of the 1st of March. I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In part 1, recommendations to the council, item 142 is the Special Interest Group Options Review on the Waden Lane former landfill site in Farnham. Part of this report is actually to be found in the exempt annex. I don't propose to go into exempt unless colleagues wish me to do so.
Anybody wish to speak on this topic? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I just wanted to make a brief observation. Your councillors and officers have actually been working for the last 2-3 years, including 2 portfolio holders at least, on this item with the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan team. And I was a little disappointed to see not a single mention of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan in the report. In fact, there's very, very little mention of Farnham if you actually look through it. So whereas I thoroughly endorse the recommendations, especially the recommendations to work with ward councillors and Farnham Town Council, I would just like to point out that sometimes there seems to be a bit of left-hand, right-hand, and that work goes on with very good work with councillors and portfolio holders and members and officers, but it doesn't always translate itself into cohesive action. So we did call this, the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan team called this Brambleton Park in its plan, the Regulation 14, which I'm sure you've all read. The Regulation 15 you will all be receiving very soon, but the Regulation 14 has it down as Brambleton Park, but didn't. It is down as a green space for informal and formal green leisure activities. I can't remember the exact wording. So it's perfectly in line with what Waverley is suggesting in the SIG. It just seemed a shame that we had to go all around the houses to come back to something that we actually started 2 or 3 years ago. But I'm delighted that we are going to talk to Farnham Town Council.
Councillor MacLeod.
I do apologise. I think the SIG group produced a good report, actually, and identified all the reasonable options. I do agree with them dismissing the do-nothing option, the park and ride option, the housing option, and the sang option. I don't necessarily agree with them dismissing the Brambleton Park option. That seems to me to be a very good use of the site. Of course, it is costly at 2.75 million, but I can think of many things that we spent on that were less value than that. I do agree that the option of moving the Farnham Town Football Club to the site is a good option, a good use of the site, and particularly the idea of also using it for junior clubs and for informal recreation use of people nearby. However, I have to say that I totally disagree with the proposal to use the existing sports ground at the Memorial Hall for housing. I think that can't be allowed to happen. I certainly would be doing everything to prevent it happening. Why do I say that? Well, the actual Memorial Hall and sports ground were actually given to the community after the First World War for recreational and sporting use in memory of the employees of the brewery who had lost their lives in the First World War. We seem to already be breaking some of the covenants in that gift, in that we're using part of the sports ground to extend the Memorial Hall. And we also actually seem to be breaking another covenant, in that we're not supposed to give the land exclusively to the use of any one organisation. And we seem to have allowed the sports ground to be used exclusively by the football club. I'm a supporter of the football club. I've got nothing against the football club. I'm just pointing out that we do seem to have broken that covenant. In terms of other covenants, actually, in terms of possibly using it for housing, I'd just like to read out quickly what the covenants actually say. They say, first of all, the council shall not build or allow to be built upon any part of the said premises any building erection other than in connection with the objects specified in Clause 2. Now, what Clause 2 says, if I can find it quickly. Clause 2 actually says that the sports ground should only be used for sporting purposes. I haven't actually got hold of the exact wording. I'd like to point actually that covenant's not something that should be ignored. Covenants can only be returned if it can be shown that the beneficiaries no longer exist, or the benefit no longer exists. The beneficiaries of this covenant are the people of Farnham. And last time I looked, there were quite a few inhabitants of Farnham still around, and a lot of young people who want to use sports grounds. So the next thing I would like to say, I feel that regardless of any legal consideration, this is morally wrong, and that the people who actually gifted this all that time ago, I think they would be horrified if they saw what was actually happening. And I think when we've got philanthropic people who are willing to give gifts, I think we should respect their views. We wouldn't be encouraging other people to do the same if we actually totally ignore the views of the people who made the gift. The last thing I'd like to do is ask a couple of quick questions. We seem to be spending £50,000 in a feasibility report. I'd like to understand what that money is going to be spent on. And I'd like to also ask how much money has been spent already on taking legal advice in relation to this matter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try not to repeat anything that my fellow Farnham councillors have said, and I also don't want to drift into the pink sheets, into an exempt session. So I won't refer to anything in the pink papers, which basically contain the costings and the legal advice. The problem I see it is that the problems are not in the pink papers. It's about spending £50,000 on a feasibility study. A study's already been done by the special interest group. You can see from the papers, I mean, it was quite extensive, the study that was done. We've got 3 pages on park and ride, when clearly, I mean, I think we all knew that the location was unsuitable. It's in the middle of a residential area, it's without good road links, etc., etc. It was a pointless waste of time. Let's avoid wasting time and money. This proposal looks fraught with possible legal and financial challenges, such that nothing at all may become of it, or it could go on for years and years, as it already has. The flooding issue of the football ground could probably be solved by spending that £50,000. What I'd like to do, though, is refer you to page 29 at the bottom of minute 142.21. It says that the likely route to overcome the restrictive covenants could be through appropriation for planning purposes. The Memorial Hall extension is built on the sports ground with covenants. If appropriation through long leases required for housing, why is it not required for the day centre? When I asked the question relating to the covenants at a previous council meeting, I was shouted down and told that they could be ignored. Surely, if it held water for the Memorial Hall...
Excuse me, just a minute, Councillor. Are you trying to propose an amendment?
No, I'm making a comment.
You're making a comment, but you asked for something to be changed.
No.
Okay, then I just want to be clear where we're going, that's all.
Well, all I'm basically saying is that if it held water for the Memorial Hall, the same should surely apply for the development, for the housing development. Or was the previous decision on the Memorial Hall incorrect? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am a Farnham councillor. I'm rather puzzled by some of the observations that have been made by my colleagues. To me, what's potentially on offer is a much better facility for Farnham Town Football Club, and a walking space for the dogs, and spaces for junior football to be played. Now that seems to me to be a terrific gain for the town, and I'd really like it to happen. Now clearly, looking at the options has identified a number of problems. One of them is the covenants. Another will be the attitude of people in the town as to whether they want a facility in that location compared to nearer to the centre of town. But that's why we should be doing this investigation, to check out all of these issues and, if possible, make it happen. I'd like to see it happen. I don't want it to ride roughshod over the covenants made to protect the memories of chaps that lost their lives in the First World War. So what the motion says is that we're going to do this study. Let's crack on with it. It's £50,000, not millions of pounds at risk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Potts.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just to sum up on this, because I think there need to be some points made absolutely clear. This site is a very, very difficult site in terms of its geological use, the fact it is a former landfill site, and we do need to be absolutely sure of where we're going with this and what we're getting into. Hence the reason that we have asked for it to start and undertake the feasibility study. Maybe that we'd actually don't spend, we certainly hope not to have to spend all £50,000, but we need some parameters in which to work, that's very clear. All options have got to be looked at, and they've got to be looked at before we make a decision. And as I say, and you can see very clearly in these papers, we have not made a decision. What I would say, speaking as a Farnham councillor and a former portfolio holder myself, is that we know in Farnham and across the borough we have a great shortage of recreational space. The ideas that are in the report and detailed do show a mixed-use site which has a number of benefits, and that is why we need to explore it in greater detail. And I commend this to Council. Thank you.
Right, we have two recommendations, recommendation 74 and 75 on page 31. Because of the discussion, I will take them separately. Can I see those in favour of recommendation 74? You okay, Emma? Right, those against? Those abstaining? Right, thank you. That recommendation is clearly carried. Recommendation 75. Can we all agree recommendation 75? You objecting to that, or you can agree with that? You can agree with that one. Right, thank you. Right, that's agreed. Councillor Potts.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Moving on to item 144, which is, again, much of which is in exempt, and that's the disposal of land in Farncombe, as set out in members' papers.
Bearing in mind the exempt nature of this particular item, does anybody wish to speak? Recommendation, then is recommendation 76, is that agreed? Agreed.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Item 145 is the disposal of land in Farnham. Again, most of that is in exempt, but there is a detailed report.
Again, bearing in mind it's in exempt, does anybody wish to speak? If not, is that recommendation agreed? Agreed. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Moving to part 2 items in terms of matters of report. I move to item 146, the Executive Forward Programme.
Councillor Williamson.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to talk about, well, I've covered a number of issues in the 2 previous executive meetings and asked a number of questions, but I'd just like to focus on one of them, if I may, and that's the agree to the Brightwell's funding issue. In the press, the portfolio holder was quoted as saying it would go to a council meeting in 4 to 6 weeks' time. And as there is no council meeting in June, that rather makes me wonder whether a special meeting of the executive and an extraordinary meeting of the council will be called for that purpose. However, putting that to one side, it seems that with no commercial investors willing to make the risk, our council taxpayers are being forced to do so, following Surrey County Council's statement that the commercial funding will be coming from them. My point is that the completion or determination of Crest contract for East Street is a big deal. It's a great big deal. It's been at least 13 years in the making, and as a publicly funded project, the utmost probity and transparency is expected. But unless the matter goes to ONS for scrutiny, which incidentally we've asked for and been refused, then members and the public would get a matter of just days to digest, scrutinise and question the proposals in between the committee papers being published and the decision being made. At past executive meetings, when questioned under this item, the leader has outlined the process but hasn't given any indication of whether scrutiny through the ONS process will be allowed. So, on behalf of a lot of very concerned residents, I'd like to say, if I may, Mr. Mayor, that with your permission, I hope the leader or deputy leader will take the opportunity now to assure us that the ONS scrutiny of the proposed public funding of the Brightwell scheme will definitely be allowed. After all, if there's nothing to hide, then surely overview and scrutiny is to be welcomed. Thank you.
Councillor Potts, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Williamson. Just to be absolutely clear, as we've said in the past, and I will reiterate yet again, this will come to a full member briefing, which will allow all members to debate and ask questions they feel relevant. And as much in terms of the papers and the paperwork supporting this will be in open, as is possible, given that a lot of this is commercially sensitive. And there will be a special executive if necessary, but also a full council held for this matter. Thank you.
Moving on then to item 148 on page 33, Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment on the SANG situation. The consultation on the revised avoidance strategy just has another 5 days to run. The strategy is in accordance with Natural England's approved approach for providing alternative space for the recreation of homeowners living within the 5 kilometre zone of the spa, and this applies to most of Farnham. Partially due to an average occupancy rate, measurements of footfall in the park and improvements to the facilities for the SANG qualification, it has been calculated that the unallocated capacity would increase to 1,462 dwellings. This is most likely to be sufficient for most of the Farnham development. Many developers seeking permission for Farnham housing are now offering to provide their own SANG, which removes some of the pressure on our provision. If this was not the case, then we may have to provide very substantial additional space, which would increase any sill charge. However, this is looking increasingly unlikely now, but Waverley is still keeping its options open. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fraser. No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The course of development of the SANG saga has been long, and it's taken quite a long time from the European provision of a directive to the UK regulations. We've had many advisory documents. We've had an ability to adopt, if we wish, the Wadensee findings as case law. We've had the provision of a mini plan, and without labouring the point, it's taken several years to come to our avoidance strategy, which we are now consulting on amending. For those of you that have had the patience to read through all this great stack of regulations, you'll notice that there are two distinct threads. The one that's been, I think, exploited being the provision of the SANG and the Section 106 contributions, totaling, I believe, about £1 million for Farnham Park. But there is a second string to these regulations, and it occurs in every document. It is that there should be an objective assessment made at regular intervals with objective data, that it should be firmly corroborated that the SANG provisions are working. I believe it was 7 years between the two monitoring attempts on the SPA, on the Special Protection Area on the Heath. 7 years between them. And it was noted, very briefly at the end, that both the public and the number of dogs they had with them had increased. Not systematically over every point of entry, but it had increased. But during that 7-year period, no one had bothered to look at Farnham Park. But as a resident, I walked through the park several times a week, and from my point of view, I had counted heads and dogs' heads too, and I thought the dogs were increasing, particularly when the professional dog walkers were on the way. But I think its footprint ecology took a turn around the park and said, oh, it's underutilised, there's plenty of room for more dogs. Well, we're trying to preserve the habitat of 3 very endangered species of bird. And to be frank with you, the logical conclusion from having more people on the spa and less people with dogs in the park would be that SANG is not working. It is wrong, it is counterproductive. But no, when it comes before the executive, they say, oh, that shows there's more capacity, let's increase the SANG provision in the park so we can carry on building, we can carry on loading housing estates into Farnham, and we can carry on exacting Section 106 contributions. I would think we're missing an opportunity here. We should pause, reflect, and change the rules, because the existing regulations are being misapplied, and they are being stretched, they're being bent, and maybe even broken. And I think it's time to think up a new way of administering this cause. And I think perhaps no housing proposal should be even entertained unless it carries with it its own SANG. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and be very brief. The questions asked by the inspector, which floored Waverley's 2006 core strategy attempt, still apply. He asked, where is the evidence that the mitigation is effective? The law has not changed. Councillor Mirrlees quoted the relevant statute at the January Community Overview and Scrutiny meeting. I've also asked at the March Executive. We simply ask the officers to confirm that the law requires convincing, objective evidence. Other members may have noted that we never got an answer to the question. The very question which sunk the 2006 local plan and stands every chance of sinking the next local plan. Given the need for convincing objective evidence means that we cannot simply pretend that we have created mitigation by pretending we have improved the park's accessibility with an imaginary new car park at the east. This avoidance strategy and consultation are, in my view, a charade. Thank you.
Councillor Potts, do you wish to respond?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item 150 on page 33. Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So moving on, we have item 150, which is the Frensham Great Pond and Site Amenities Upgrade Project, and item 151, the Post-Payment Parking Scheme Pilot. Moving on, we have item 152, which is the surrender and renewal of the ground lease at Farncombe Wanderers Cricket Pavilion. And that, Mr Mayor, concludes the minutes, and I commend them to Council.
Are those minutes agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Potts, will you kindly present the minutes of the Executive of the 5th of April?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I present the minutes of the 5th of April, and I believe I have a seconder. Thank you.
Happy to second again, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Potts.
Mr Mayor, thank you. The first item in Part 1, which is recommendations to the Council, is item 156, and that relates to staffing changes. Again, members will see that it's a comprehensive paper relating to the change in role of the monitoring and returning officer. And you will also see that we have ensured that this has been the subject of succession planning, and we have a very robust new proposal before members today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? If not, then we move directly to the recommendations, starting at the bottom of page 61, recommendation 78, and then on the top of page 62, 79 through 81. Are these agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Potts.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Item 157 is the appointment of a health and wellbeing officer. This has been become a corporate priority and was identified at the council meeting back in February. So that is the post that we are referring to in this report. Thank you.
Any speakers? No? If not, then can we go straight to the recommendations 82 and 83, the bottom of page 63. Are those agreed? Agreed. Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Part 2 items, matters of report. Moving to the item 158, which is the forward programme. Moving to item 159, the Waverley Borough local plan update. And moving on through the tenant involvement strategy and the performance management report.
Okay, backtracking slightly, if we go back to item 158, you did ask to speak yourself at that stage. Do you wish to say any more on that item?
I think Councillor Williamson has said all there is to say on that matter and had a response already. Thank you.
On item 159 then, Councillor Adams.
Towards the end of March, a further assessment of our plan progress was made. This identified the chapters of our local plan which have been circulated to councillors for comment. We're looking forward to more comments. Further chapters have been released since. I appreciate everyone is waiting for the chapter on housing allocation. Generally, these allocations are known to you, but at the moment we still have some unknowns. One is the results to fulfil the request from Highways England to receive joint report covering Waverley and Guildford together for the A3. The joint transport modelling is still on schedule to be completed and reported mid-May. These reports will need further discussion with Guildford and Highways England, as they are bound to have implications for the A31, the A281 and the A3. On the 27th of April, there will be a cooperation meeting with Surrey County Council and Guildford to discuss implications of their plan recently released. Also covered will be further detail in the 2 statements of common ground we are planning to finalise shortly. The first statement of common ground is the one relating to the A3, which includes Highways England, Surrey County Council, Waverley and Guildford. And the second statement of common ground relates to our housing market area, and that includes Woking, Guildford and Waverley. The primary issue there is that Waverley's numbers, although their plan was adopted, are considerably below their objectively assessed need, and I think they are likely to be asked to reconsider those numbers. So we are setting up an arrangement with ourselves, Woking and Guildford, to cope with that. In outline, we are largely clear how the first 10 years of our plan can be fulfilled, and there are no surprises there. All possibilities are known. The last 5 years are more circumspect and are dependent on the results of the transport and other infrastructure discussions we are having. Even when some of what needs to be done is clear, it is not clear whether there will be sufficient funds available in the time period for the work to be undertaken. For this reason, we are seeking further clarification in more detail from the DCLG in respect of an acceptable constraint, allowing only an outline for the last 5 years of our plan. This would be accompanied by a commitment for early review when those constraints are overcome. Finally, we have now contacted the Inspectorate to review our plan before publication. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Forozewski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it is disappointing that the plan has been delayed on the key traffic and transport matters. However, point 316 of the executive papers state there is also a link between the transport work and the infrastructure delivery plan. Officers are in the process of seeking information from infrastructure providers on the infrastructure likely to be required to support the emerging spatial strategy. This includes transport infrastructure, as well as matters such as school places, health facilities, drainage and other utility requirements. The infrastructure delivery plan is a key supporting document both for the examination of the local plan and as part of the evidence base for the community infrastructure levy. Given the recommendation before us this evening that the Executive notes the progress with the local plan and agrees the amendment to the timetable, is this now an ideal time to establish a member, SIG or similar forum involving outside bodies and stakeholders to work with and support the portfolio holder in addressing the key constraints that could affect the deliverability of sites? It's technically infeasible to deal with effluent produced in Cranley, with 700 homes now granted permission and a further 340 that may be determined next week. How are the utilities going to cope? Thames Water have already said capacity is an issue in Cranley. The system will take 10 years to upgrade. What are we going to do? Do we have a utilities plan? I have been quoted recently as saying that Cranley has failed our residents. That's not actually what I said. I hate to say it, but I believe Waverley has failed Cranley. It's Waverley's duty not to add to the problem. A SIG or a similar forum is an opportunity to explore and review before the plan goes before an inspector. I hope you will consider this, and thank you for letting me speak.
Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question was answered earlier.
Thank you. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The issue I would like to raise here is the one of public consultation. Public consultation is extremely important in relation to local plan. Local plan is the most important thing this council is involved with. It affects the whole borough right into the 2030s. And it's very important that we involve the public and make them feel part of it. But there's a second reason, actually, that the inspector will expect us to have done proper public consultation. And I'd remind the council that last time we failed the inspection essentially in the first morning. The reason why it's necessary to do public consultation is that things have changed significantly from the public consultation that was done about 18 months ago. The number of houses we're talking about has gone up from 470 per year to 519. The plan has gone from an 18-year plan to a 19-year plan, and the total number of houses has gone up from 8,460 to 9,861. That's a 17% increase. So things have changed very significantly since the last consultation that was done, and I would advise that we'd be very much in danger of failing the local plan public examination if we don't do a proper public consultation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Potts, do you wish to respond?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly to, firstly to Councillor MacLeod's point in terms of public consultation. I can assure Councillor MacLeod, obviously we all want the local plan to succeed. And I think all members, whatever party, will concur with that. One thing that officers and the portfolio holder will be doing is discussing this whole aspect with our critical friend and with the advisors from Bristol to make sure that we are absolutely robust in that area. And I'm sure both myself and Councillor Adams do note the concerns you've raised. In terms of the suggestion of a SIG and the matters raised by Councillor Forozeski, yet again, I know there are a number of concerns being voiced from Cranley about infrastructure, and especially in terms of water and sewage, etc., from a number of emails I've received myself in the last few days. And what I would suggest is that we actually, the three of us, Councillor Adams, myself and Councillor Forozeski, actually meet outside this council meeting to discuss the matters she's raised. Thank you.
Does that conclude your report, Councillor Potts?
After a very lengthy report, Mr. Mayor, yes, it does indeed conclude my report. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, moving on then to the minutes of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee meeting held on the 24th of March. Councillor Inchbald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to present the minutes of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee meeting held on the 24th of March 2016, and I believe I have a seconder.
Thank you. I'm pleased to second that, Mr. Mayor.
There are no items in Part 1, and I'm not aware of any speakers in Part 2. That concludes my report.
Is that agreed? Is that agreed? Thank you.
I said it would be a non-event.
Minutes of the Audit Committee held on the 15th of March. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to present the minutes of the Audit Committee, 15th of March 2016. There were no items under Part 1, and I'm not aware of any... there are questions under Part 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson, on item 45, though I just caution you to remember that at the actual meeting, a lot of this was an exempt. I know some matters have now come into the public statement, but please speak with care.
Thank you very much for that advice, Mr. Mayor, and the opportunity to speak. Further to the motion that I put forward under the public questions earlier, I think I should perhaps take the opportunity here to ask the executive itself to give consideration to the advantages of taking a transparent, accountable approach to the handling of the 2014 incident. I'm happy to represent UKIP's call for an independent inquiry into how the fraud incident was handled, but I don't necessarily think that the cost in terms of time, public money, can be justified. Certainly not at this time. Because there's still a lot of unanswered questions which the leadership might like to answer through an executive meeting, preceded perhaps by an ONS meeting in select committee mode. As a member, I basically don't like being told through a press release that this is the final word. And in essence, the matter is closed. And so even we as councillors, ultimately responsible for managing the public funds, can't ask questions. According to our constitution, we have a transparency agenda, and we should uphold the Nolan principles of public life, which means that now that the sub judice restrictions no longer apply, the residents we serve are entitled to have their questions fully answered. If we as councillors want to be absolutely sure that the systemic problems highlighted by this matter have been fully and permanently resolved, and I do think we need to be sure of that, all of us, then the matter cannot be considered to be concluded. Will you confirm, please, allowing the scrutiny of this matter through an ONS and the executive by adding it to the forward programme for June? Executive meeting in order to obtain closure and so possibly avoid any perceived need for an external inquiry.
Councillor Legal, you wish to raise a point of order?
Well, it's not for this council to decide what ONS wants to scrutinise.
Well, yeah, it's a point of order. I think we're not in here for a debate. I'm sorry. Let the Councillor Williamson make his statement.
Okay. Society moves on by disclosure, and it moves backwards by secrecy. Hiding or covering up issues that might prove embarrassing is the worst thing that can be done. Ask any professional spin doctor, or perhaps David Cameron, who has learnt the hard way over the past couple of weeks with his tax affairs. The rules are quite simple. Get all the information out into the open, get it out quickly, and tell it yourself. In the case of this fraud incident, the council did exactly the opposite. It hid the information, it took forever to come out and still hasn't come out in its entirety, and it was left by a whistleblower to tell the press. I think it's time to restore the council's integrity. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards, do you care to comment?
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. You were at the last audit committee meeting, and I think you could say that there was full transparency at that meeting, and there was full questioning by all the, well, you didn't, if you didn't think that, then there's something dreadfully wrong in your thinking. Anyway, just to go back to what you've been saying, it's not something that the audit committee can decide on, because the audit committee reports directly to the council. Okay, and that's how it is. Okay, thank you very much. Could I then ask for the members to agree the minutes of the audit committee?
Before you go that far, do you think, Councillor Edwards, we could have a seconder to your
Sorry, can I have a seconder to the minutes, please?
I'm happy, Mr. Mayor, to second the minutes.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. At this stage, I'd just like to add one other thing, and that is to say thank you to all the current members of the audit committee. They've done a tremendous job. We've done lots of changes. And it's been really, really interesting, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Are these minutes agreed then? Thank you. That brings us to the end of the meeting.
Please rise whilst the Mayor leaves the chamber.